This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
The United States has reached out to China diplomatically about reducing its purchases of Iranian crude oil, U.S. and European officials said on Tuesday, as Washington seeks to persuade Tehran to resume talks about reviving the 2015 nuclear deal. Purchases of Iranian oil by Chinese companies are believed to have helped keep Iran's economy afloat despite U.S. sanctions that are designed to choke off such sales to put pressure on Iran to curb its nuclear program. "We are aware of the purchases that Chinese companies are making of Iranian oil," said a senior U.S. official who spoke on condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the matter.
OPEC Plus is likely to stick to an existing deal to add 400,000 barrels per day, BPD, to its output for November when it meets next week, sources said, despite oil hitting a three-year high above $80 a barrel and pressure from consumers for more supply. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and Allies led by Russia, known as OPEC Plus, agreed in July to increase production by 400,000 barrels of oil per day each month to phase out 5.8 million barrels of oil per day in cuts. It also agreed to assess the deal in December. "So far we will keep the plan to increase by 400,000 barrels of oil per day," one of the sources said.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
British soldiers will start driving tankers soon to replenish empty pumps as drivers queued again for fuel after days of shortages, despite Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying the situation was improving. Britain has been gripped by a rush of panic buying for almost a week that has left pumps dry across major cities, after oil companies warned they did not have enough tanker drivers to move petrol and diesel from refineries to filling stations. Business Minister Kwasi Kwarteng said 150 soldiers had been mobilized, and would be driving tankers within a few days.
China on Wednesday demanded railway companies and local authorities raise their game in shipping vital coal supplies to utilities, as regions key to the world's No. 2 economy grapple with power cuts that have crippled industrial output. The order, handed down from China's powerful state planner, comes after a collision of tight coal supplies, tougher emission standards and strong manufacturing demand has pushed the price of coal, the biggest source of China's electricity, to eye-watering records, just as winter approaches. Thermal coal futures in China hit an all-time high of 1,376 yuan and 80 fen, $212.92, per ton earlier on Wednesday, adding yet more pressure on power utilities unable to recoup added fuel costs. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Metal consumers in China, from appliance makers to auto, construction and solar panel firms, are readying themselves to face potential supply shocks after power curbs and shortages forced several smelters to cut production in recent weeks. Output curbs tied to emissions caps over the winter are nothing new to China's steel and aluminum makers. This year, though, power constraints dragged on through summer because of low coal supplies and strong demand, leading to forced shutdowns of energy-intensive operations and worries about sufficient heating as cooler weather approaches. Power-hungry sectors like aluminium and cement were also always likely to be first in line when Chinese regions were told to redouble their efforts earlier this year to meet lower energy consumption and intensity targets.
Copper prices fell for a second day on Wednesday as a power supply crisis gripped China, the largest metals consumer, shutting factories and casting doubt on the outlook for demand. Chinese shares fell and the yuan weakened, while Goldman Sachs and Nomura revised down projections for China's economic growth this year. Outside China, doubts were emerging about the global recovery as central banks prepared to reduce stimulus and the U.S. government lurched towards a funding crisis.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Britain's Farming and Environment Minister George Eustice announced on Wednesday that regulations related to gene editing in agricultural research would be eased in England following a public consultation. Rules will now largely be aligned with conventional breeding methods for research and development into plants, although scientists will still be required to notify the government of any research trials. It is a tool that could help us in order to tackle some of the biggest challenges that we face, around food security, climate change and biodiversity loss, Eustace said in a statement announcing the relaxation. That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.